Hello, my name is Michael Knipp, and I am a professional book reviewer. As much as you and I love books, they're not as popular as they once were. I've created this series to help make book discussions spicier. Today I am going to be recapping the plot of my favorite fantasy book ever, The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This book clocks in at over 1,000 pages and is full of wonderful storytelling, foreshadowing, intricate plot lines that all interweave within each other, wonderful characters that inspire good in people, and so much theory crafting. My goal in this video is to eat one of the Pocky 2022 One Chip Challenge chips and attempt to recap everything from The Way of Kings as best as I can. Please note there probably will be spoilers in this video. I say probably because it's entirely possible I won't be able to speak. But if this video goes as intended, I will try to recap the entire plotline of The Way of Kings while under the influence of a spicy chip. I will admit, I am very afraid and I have been putting off this video for a very long time. Sniff test? It smells fairly hot. Now that the chip is actually out of the bag, it smells terrible. I'm going to be biting the chip in 3, 2, 1. Made with Carolina Reaper pepper and scorpion pepper, this high-voltage chip was created for the shocking pleasure of intense heat and pain. Just swallow it, I think. Okay, so this book starts off with a bunch of beginnings. 3 beginnings specifically, maybe 4. The first beginning is called The Prelude to the Stormlight Archive, which takes place 4,500 years before the actual story. There's like 10 dudes, but 9 of them decide to abandon one of them, and there's some kind of weird pact. There's demon monsters, everything gets killed. You don't know what's going on, except you know that one person is definitely getting screwed over by the other 9 people. You have no context here. The second beginning is the actual prologue where Seth, who's like an anime beast guy who uses magic that allows him to manipulate gravity, zips along the walls with a fantasy lightsaber the night that the Parshendi and the humans are signing a peace treaty. This is an awesome battle where Seth has to fight his way through the peace treaty celebration to kill the King Gavilar. At his death, Gavilar leaves a message with his own blood to tell his brother Dalinar to read The Way of Kings, which is a book that exists in their world. If you like this video, I suggest you share it with some of your friends. Maybe you can get them into reading, because reading is spicy. Weirdly enough, even though it's the night of the peace treaty, and it doesn't make sense, the Parshendi take credit for the murder. Nothing about this continues to make sense. The third beginning, because it's an actual chapter 1 where we realize that every single chapter starts with quotes from people who are dying, quotes from people on their deathbed. None of them make sense. Everything's out of context, just like everything else. Through the eyes of a character named Sen, who is a young soldier, we see the protagonist of this series, Kaladin, who is essentially Brandon Sanderson's attempt at writing a Robin Hobb character who he likes to hate on and beat up all the time. Yes, I am actually crying. Sen is scared and he's sad, but Kaladin shows his bravery when he decides to protect Sen instead of just letting him die. He tries to rally up his people, and everyone seems to have this almost worshipful exception for everyone seems to love Kaladin. He tries to save the boy's life, but he ends up dying because some dude with another fantasy lightsaber kills him. Frick! Okay, I have to take a drink of milk. Rules for the challenge. Eat the entire chip. Prove it. Show us your tongue. Wait as long as possible before drinking or eating anything, and post your reaction. So like, this is 5 to 7 years later, Dalinar, the brother of the king that got killed, starts having visions that he thinks are from God. Dalinar used to be this evil dude called the Blackthorn who murdered people for fun all the time, but now he's good and he wants to be a biblical man. The Way of Kings is like their Bible. Oh, frick me, man. But because he's having visions from God, or he's told to unite the High Princes because everything in the kingdom is built around building up oneself like every political system. Everyone thinks that Dalinar's crazy. As the dead king's brother, he has a lot of influence on the kingdom, but the actual king is the dead king's son, Elokar, who's kind of like a puppet. He's like Elmo, but if he was Caillou. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really does help the algorithm so much. Dalinar has 2 sons. We're only going to talk about Adolin right here. Adolin is a very hot boy. He's also a talented duelist, but he does understand why his dad is a wimp now, who used to be a strong fighter. He's amazing. He's wonderful. He's hot. He's basically the Chad freaking Michael freaking Murray of the Stormlight universe, and I don't care what Elliot Brooks says. In the previous chapter with Kaladin, where we saw him in his glory, something has definitely happened because we are now reintroduced to him, and he's a very different man than he used to be. He's very depressed. He's essentially sold from a slaver to the army, where he's used for something called Bridge 4. The people in Bridge 4 are basically Suicide Squad soldiers who run bridges because the battles take place over chasms with giant pits. The battlefield is called the Shattered Plains. It evidently used to be a plain, but it broke, and now there's cracks everywhere. Frick me! Kaladin tries to kill himself, but a wind Spren talks to him and convinces him to not kill himself. Spren are like fairies, but they exist for every element and emotion and feeling in the world of Stormlight. It doesn't make any sense. But the Spren decides to tell Kaladin not to kill himself. Kaladin eventually starts building up a little bit of emotional support in his own self, and he convinces the men of Bridge 4 to try not to just die, because that's everything that happens to the bridge crews. Eventually, instead of just running straight into their death, Kaladin decides to have them try a tactic where they turn the bridge sideways and they use it as a shield while they're charging the approaching archers. Unfortunately, since they're not using themselves as Suicide Squad soldiers, some of the actual soldiers who aren't bridge people get killed, and because it was Kaladin's idea, he's forced to basically get executed by standing trial before the high storm. The world of Roshar is blessed by massive storms that are crazy, that circle the globe or planet or whatever, and they're used to light up the money that they use for light. It's so strange and hard to explain, but the high storms are bad news, and staying outside in one of them is a death sentence. However, Kaladin doesn't die, and instead he has a vision, potentially from God, and it's shortly after this that he starts to suspect that he might have superpowers that come potentially from the Stormlight. Hello, title, the Stormlight Archive. Worth noting, if you've never actually looked up how many times the word storm or a derivation of the word storm is used in the Stormlight Archive, I highly recommend it. If you laughed at least 3 times during the recap of this video, you are legally obligated to share it with at least one other person you know. The entire book, Kaladin is having flashbacks about him and his brother Tien. You know right away from the beginning, they basically tell you Tien's going to die, so there's not a lot of stakes here. There is good moments with Kaladin and his family, and the actual important thing to draw from these flashbacks is why Kaladin hates the Light Eyes and why he has this prejudice against these people built into him. Because you know that Tien's going to die from the beginning, you kind of know exactly how it's going to. It's not very hard to figure out. These are my least favorite parts of the book. Oh, my nose is running. Then we switch over our perspective to someone named Shallan, who is a redhead, who thinks she's really clever and funny, but also she's super insecure at the same time. She's not like other girls, like Annie or Anne of Green Gables. She's a redheaded orphan, and it is a hard knock life for her. She's trying to convince the King's sister to train her to use something called a soulcaster. Just kidding, she wants to steal Yasna's soulcaster. Yasna is the King's sister, and she needs to use the soulcaster to make something to make money for her family. It doesn't matter right now. All you know is she wants to be Yasna's ward. She wants to be trained by Yasna for the higher arts, but she actually wants to steal this soulcaster from Yasna. But she starts falling in love with a priest, which doesn't seem kosher, and I didn't mean that to be freaking a pun. Shallan starts to like working with Yasna until Yasna decides to teach her a lesson that involves straight up going into an alley and murdering thieves, and then Shallan decides that she doesn't like her anymore and she's gonna steal the soulcaster. So she does. Anyway, at some point, the monk dude that she falls in love with tries to murder her, and Yasna finds out that she stole the soulcaster. It turns out they both also have superpowers that seem to be related to Stormlight. Also, Shallan has one of those spread fairy things too. Elokar, because his dad never loves him, fakes an assassination attempt on himself to try to get people to pay attention to him because people don't think that he's taking the job seriously enough or something. Like, it's very, whatever it is, it's very hypocritical. It doesn't make any sense, like a lot of things. I mean, he doesn't make sense. The book makes sense. Elokar does not make sense. When Dalinar finds out about the fake assassination attempt, which they spend a lot of the book trying to solve, Dalinar kicks the crap out of him and says, by the way, I'm going to date your mom. His mom's name is Avani, and they start falling in love. Now that Kaladin knows he has superpowers, he starts to train in those superpowers, and he starts to learn how to do things called lashings, which are very similar to the things that the animated assassin dude at the beginning of the book, Seth, also did. He learns about these oaths for the things called the Knight's Radiance, and the oaths that they need to swear are life before death, strength before weakness, and journey before destination. It's the beginning of this path of like a sort of religion, but more like a protector, Justicar from Mass Effect situation, if you know what that is. Now that he's inspired and he has superpowers, he decides that he's going to help the bridgemen escape the bridge crews during some bridge run they're planning that they're going to leave and try to bring supplies and weapons or whatever. Dalinar, who's been trying to unite the High Princes for this entire time, finally gets it through some of the other people's head that the military-industrial complex is just wasting lives and time just to try to get money. He decides to make a push to finally end the war that they've been fighting since the time when the king was assassinated and the Parshendi claimed that they're the ones that did it. When push comes to shove, they decide to have this final battle on the tower where Sadeas and Dalinar decide to work together, using both of their armies combined to crush the Parshendi for good. Unfortunately for the good guys, Sadeas was a giant piece of crap, Tyrion Logain son of a gun, and he decides to have all the bridge crews bring Dalinar and Sadeas out to the tower onto the battlefield Then he decides to pull all of his bridge crews, basically setting up Dalinar and Adolin to die with all of their armies. This seems okay based on their society because their society is all about just the winner wins, I guess. Kaladin and the bridge crews were attempting to escape at this point when they realize that they have an opportunity. There's a lot of chaos going on, but then Kaladin looks back and he sees that Dalinar and Adolin are getting screwed over, and he decides that he has to protect them. During this point, there's a combination where they bring their one bridge to the chasm. They put the bridge down. Kaladin has flashbacks of when his brother died. That's when we finally actually get to see the scene. And he swears his first major oath: I will protect those who cannot protect themselves. There's this huge, awesome, climactic battle. Kaladin and the bridgemen save Dalinar and Adolin. They all head back to camp. Then we cut back to Navani, the king's mom, who was in love with Dalinar. Navani knows that Sadeas is highly sus when he comes back and says that Dalinar died in the battle. So she offers up a prayer on the ground in the form of a glyph. That's the way that it's done there. She burns this glyph. She prays for justice to be done. While this is happening, and Sadeas is basically gloating that he's alive and Dalinar's not, and he's the new boss now or whatever, Dalinar and his people arrive back at the place. Dalinar says, you know what's, there's this whole awesome, wonderful speech that I cannot recount at this time, but Dalinar basically decides that the lives of the men of Bridge 4 are worth more than the treasures of the super armor and lightsaber that he has. So Dalinar trades his sword Oathbringer, stabbing it into the ground, right into the justice symbol, showing that Dalinar is purchasing the bridgemen for the cost of this super-powered armor, and then Dalinar becomes the owners of Bridge 4, where he promotes Kaladin to be like his right-hand bodyguard man. The book ends with some major revelations that seem impactful, but you don't really understand a lot of what they mean at the time. One of them is that God is dead, his name was Honor, and all the visions that Dalinar has been receiving are like recorded videos from the past, and he's actually dead. The evil god Odium killed him. Next is Shallan and Yoslin decide that the Parshmen, the guys that they've been fighting in the war, are actually the Voidbringers, which is the weird, creepy demon monsters that I may or may not have alluded to when I was talking about the prologue when I first ate the chip. I'm not sure if I covered that or not. I think I did. They think the Parshmen are the Voidbringers. They find out that the creepy priest, who I think I talked about, trying to kill Shallan, is part of a group called the Ghostbloods, and they're also investigating the Voidbringers. I totally forgot to mention that Seth, the assassin, from the beginning of the book, he basically is a contract killer religiously bound to whoever holds his stone called the Oath Stone. He's been doing dirty jobs for somebody. You find out that somebody was the king of the city that Jasnah and Shallan were in. The city was called Kharbranth. The king is called Taravangian, and when he attempts to kill Taravangian for the guy who stole his Oath Stone, it turns out to be Taravangian, and it turns out that Taravangian has been doing experiments on people as they die, and all of the quotes from the people at the beginning of the chapters that are just dead people quotes have been Taravangians basically killing people and then writing down their last words for some sort of experiment, because it seems like people in their dying breaths get to see some vision of something in the future or some superpower or whatever. Finally, the one dude that got screwed over at the beginning when I was like super dying and I don't know what I said. The one dude that got screwed over in the 4,500 years ago section, he pops back up into the future, but we don't know anything about what that means. And that is The Way of Kings. I legitimately don't know what I said during the sections where I was really suffering. At this point, everything has mellowed back down to a reasonable level. My plan originally was to try not to drink milk, but I failed the challenge because obviously I am a giant wuss baby. If you would like to see me do the One Chip Challenge recap with another book, please let me know in the comments down below which book you would like. If you are a Way of Kings expert, please let me know the most important thing that I missed in the comments down below. Have you done the One Chip Challenge? Have you ever seen a One Chip Challenge like this before? If you'd like to see more videos from me in the future, please hit that subscribe button. I can't wait to see you again in the next video. I can't tell you what to do because I'm not your dad, but I am your best friend. Goodbye.
No one ever get enough. Always looking out tired. Sleep. No one ever get enough. If it don't show up, I might get fired. Sleep. No one ever get enough. Always looking out tired. Sleep. No one ever get enough. If I don't show up, I might get fired.